I never thought I'd be writing down serial numbers from $20 bills. But there I was at my kitchen table, carefully recording each one in a small notebook with shaking hands. The evidence was becoming impossible to ignore. Over the past 3 months, money had been disappearing from my purse every single time my 26-year-old daughter Sophia came to visit. Small amounts at first, 20 here, 40 there, but it was adding up to nearly $300. The worst part wasn't even the money itself. It was the sick feeling in my stomach every time I hugged her goodbye, wondering if she'd taken something again while I was making us lunch, or when I stepped outside to water my plants. Before I share this shocking experience, please show your support with a like and subscribe. Comment your location below. My name is Carmen Diaz. I'm 49 years old, and I never imagined I'd be in this position with one of my children. Sophia Martinez, who kept her father's last name after our divorce, had always been my free spirit. The artistic one who struggled more than her siblings, but who I thought would never outright steal from me. She'd been coming by every few weeks, usually around lunchtime on Saturdays, and our visits had become something I looked forward to, despite her recent struggles with keeping steady employment. The first time I noticed money missing, I blamed myself. Maybe I'd miscounted. Maybe I'd spent more at the grocery store than I remembered. But when it happened a second time, right after Sophia's visit, I started paying closer attention. I began keeping my purse in my bedroom instead of leaving it on the kitchen counter. But somehow, money still went missing. "You're being paranoid, Mom," my 24-year-old son Miguel had said when I first mentioned it to him last week. Miguel Diaz still lived at home while finishing his graduate program, and he'd always been protective of his sister. "Sophia might be going through a rough patch, but she's not a thief. You know how scattered you've been since you started that new medication for your blood pressure." But I wasn't scattered about this. I'd started writing down exactly how much cash I had before each visit, and the pattern was undeniable. $20 missing after her visit on March 15th, $60 gone after March 30th, $40 after April 12th. Always from the bills tucked in my wallet, never the change, never anything else from my purse. My best friend and co-worker Patricia Santos had been the one to suggest marking the bills. We'd known each other for 15 years, working together in the billing department at the medical center, and she'd become like a sister to me, especially since my divorce. "Carmen, honey, I know this is tearing you apart," Patricia had said yesterday during our lunch break, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "But if you really think Sophia is taking money from you, you need proof." "Real proof that can't be explained away. Mark some 20s with a pen on the corner, write down the serial numbers, and see if they disappear." The idea had made me feel sick, but I'd done it anyway. 5 $20 bills, each one carefully marked with a tiny dot in the corner, and every serial number recorded in my notebook. I'd placed them strategically in my wallet, 2 in the main section, 3 tucked behind my credit cards. That was yesterday morning. Sophia had called around noon, asking if she could come by for lunch and to borrow my sewing machine for a project. She'd sounded cheerful, normal, asking about Miguel and telling me about a potential job interview next week. We'd had a lovely afternoon together, making grilled cheese sandwiches and talking about her art while she worked on what looked like alterations to a dress. I'd been so hopeful that maybe I'd been wrong, that maybe this time would be different. When she hugged me goodbye around 4 o'clock, I'd held her a little longer than usual, breathing in the familiar scent of her jasmine perfume and feeling guilty for even suspecting her. But this morning, when I checked my wallet, 2 of the marked 20s were gone. The 2 from the main section, leaving the 3 hidden behind my credit cards untouched. She'd been careful, smart about it, taking just enough that I might not notice immediately. Now I sat staring at my notebook, The serial numbers of the missing bills circled in red ink, feeling like my heart was breaking all over again. This wasn't about the $40. This was about trust, about the relationship I thought I had with my daughter, about the fact that she could look me in the eye and lie so easily. Miguel's footsteps on the stairs interrupted my thoughts. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in his pajama pants and an old college t-shirt, hair messy from sleep. Even at 24, he still looked like my little boy first thing in the morning. "Morning, Mom," he said, heading straight for the coffee maker. "You're up early for a Sunday. Everything okay?" I closed the notebook quickly, but not quickly enough. Miguel had always been observant, and I saw his eyes catch the movement. "What's that?" he asked, nodding toward the notebook as he poured his coffee. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to protect him from this, to handle it myself without dragging him into the middle of a conflict with his sister. But another part of me desperately needed someone in my family to believe me, to understand that I wasn't losing my mind or being paranoid. "It's about Sophia," I said finally. "About the money." Miguel's expression shifted from sleepy confusion to something more guarded. "Mom, we talked about this. You can't keep accusing her without any proof." "I have proof now," I said quietly, opening the notebook and sliding it across the table to him. "I marked 5 $20 bills yesterday morning before she came over. 2 of them are gone." Miguel set down his coffee mug and picked up the notebook, scanning the neat columns of serial numbers and dates. I watched his face change as he processed what he was seeing, the careful documentation, the undeniable pattern. "You really did this?" he asked, and I couldn't tell if he was impressed by my thoroughness or horrified that it had come to this. Patricia suggested it. She said if I really thought Sophia was stealing from me, I needed proof that couldn't be explained away. Miguel was quiet for a long moment, flipping through the pages where I'd recorded every suspicious incident over the past 3 months. Finally, he looked up at me with troubled eyes. "So, what happens now?" he asked. "You can't just pretend you don't know." That was exactly what I'd been wondering. How do you confront your own daughter about stealing from you? How do you have that conversation without destroying your relationship forever? And what if there was still some explanation I hadn't considered? "I don't know," I admitted. "But I can't keep letting this happen. It's not just about the money, Miguel. It's about trust. It's about the fact that she can sit in my kitchen, eat lunch with me, hug me goodbye, and take my money while she's doing it." Miguel rubbed his face with both hands, looking suddenly much older than his 24 years. "This is going to destroy her if she finds out you've been tracking her like this. And it's destroying me to know that my daughter is a thief," I snapped, then immediately felt guilty for my harsh tone. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to snap at you. This whole situation is just—" "I know," Miguel said softly. "I get it. I keep thinking there has to be some other explanation." But even as he said it, I could see in his eyes that he was starting to believe me. The evidence was too clear, too carefully documented to dismiss. My artistic, free-spirited daughter had been systematically stealing from me. And now, we all had to figure out what to do about it. The trap I'd missed finally sprang shut. The silence stretched between us as Miguel stared at the notebook. I could practically see him wrestling with the implications, trying to reconcile the sister he loved with the evidence in front of him. "Maybe we should talk to her together," he said finally. "Give her a chance to explain before we assume the worst." I felt a flutter of hope mixed with dread. "You think she'd be honest with us?" "I think if we corner her, she'll just get defensive and shut down. But if we approach it right, He trailed off, shaking his head. I don't know, Mom. I've never had to confront my sister about stealing before. I was about to respond when my phone buzzed with a text message. Sophia's name appeared on the screen, and my stomach clenched automatically now whenever I saw it. It's her, I said, showing Miguel the phone. She wants to come by this afternoon. Says she has something important to tell me. Miguel raised an eyebrow. That's odd timing. I read the message aloud. Mom, can I come over around 2? I really need to talk to you about something. It's important. What if she knows? Miguel asked quietly. What if she figured out you were tracking the money somehow? The thought had occurred to me too, and it made my hands shake slightly. Or what if she's finally ready to tell me the truth on her own? There's only one way to find out, Miguel said, checking his watch. It's almost 1 now. Do you want me to stay, for moral support? I considered it. Having Miguel there might make the conversation less confrontational, but it might also make Sophia feel ganged up on. I think I need to handle this myself first, but could you maybe be nearby, in case things go badly? Of course. I'll hang out in the backyard or something. Close enough if you need me. The next hour crawled by with excruciating slowness. Miguel helped me rehearse different ways to approach the conversation, but every scenario we discussed seemed to end in hurt feelings and damaged relationships. By the time Sophia's car pulled into my driveway, I felt sick with anxiety. Miguel squeezed my shoulder as he headed toward the back door. Remember, stay calm. Let her talk first. Maybe she'll surprise you. I watched through the front window as Sophia walked up the path. She looked different somehow. Her shoulders were hunched, and she kept running her hands through her hair in a nervous gesture I remembered from her childhood. When she knocked, I took a deep breath and opened the door. Hi, sweetheart, I said, trying to keep my voice normal. Hi, Mom. She stepped inside and gave me a brief hug, but I could feel the tension in her body. Thanks for letting me come over on short notice. We settled in the living room instead of the kitchen for once. Sophia perched on the edge of the couch, her hands fidgeting in her lap. The notebook with my evidence was still sitting on the kitchen table where Miguel and I had left it, and I found myself hoping she wouldn't notice it. So, I said gently, what did you want to talk about? Sophia's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment she looked like the little girl who used to come to me with scraped knees and hurt feelings. Mom, I need to tell you something, and you're going to be really disappointed in me. My heart started pounding. Okay, I'm listening. She took a shaky breath. I've been taking money from your purse. The admission hung in the air between us. Part of me felt relieved that she was finally being honest, but a larger part felt devastated that my suspicions had been confirmed. I waited for her to continue, not trusting myself to speak yet. I know it's stealing, she said, tears streaming down her face now. I know it's terrible, and I know I've betrayed your trust. I've been hating myself for months, but I couldn't figure out how to stop or how to tell you. How long? I asked quietly. Since March. Maybe earlier. I've lost track. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. It started small, just $20 here and there when I was really desperate. But then it became this horrible habit, and every time I told myself it would be the last time. I felt tears stinging my own eyes. Why, Sophia? If you needed money, why didn't you just ask me? She let out a bitter laugh. Because you would have wanted to know what it was for, and I couldn't tell you that. Tell me what? Sophia looked up at me with red, swollen eyes, and I could see she was struggling with whether to reveal whatever secret had driven her to this point. "The money wasn't for me, Mom. It was for—" She paused, seeming to gather her courage. "I can't tell you everything yet, but someone I care about has been in serious trouble, and I've been trying to help them. I know that doesn't excuse what I did, but I felt trapped." More questions flooded my mind, but I could see she was already at her emotional limit. "Sophia, whatever's going on, we can figure it out together. But the stealing has to stop. Today." "I know," she whispered. "That's why I'm here. I can't keep doing this to you, to us." "But Mom, the situation isn't resolved yet, and I don't know what's going to happen when—" She stopped mid-sentence, her face going pale as she looked toward the kitchen. Following her gaze, I realized she had spotted my notebook on the table, open to the page with yesterday's serial numbers. "What is that?" she asked, her voice barely audible. The blood drained from my face as I followed her gaze to the notebook. The page was clearly visible from where she sat, my careful handwriting documenting serial numbers, dates, and amounts. It looked exactly like what it was: evidence of a crime investigation. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of this moment settling between us. When I opened them, Sophia was staring at me with a mixture of horror and understanding. "You've been tracking it," she said, her voice hollow. "The money I took. You wrote it all down." I got up slowly and walked to the kitchen table, closing the notebook with deliberate care. The silence stretched between us, filled with everything we both now understood. She knew that I had known, and I knew that she knew I had been building a case against her, methodically and quietly. "When did you figure it out?" she asked, her earlier tears replaced by something that looked like resigned defeat. "A few weeks ago." I returned to the living room, still holding the notebook. The weight of it felt enormous in my hands. I started noticing the money missing, but I kept telling myself I was imagining things. Then I decided to start keeping track. Sophia's shoulders sagged. "So, when I walked in here today, confessing everything, you already knew all of it." "Not all of it," I said carefully. "I knew about the money. I didn't know why." She laughed bitterly. "Does the why even matter now? You have proof. Dates, amounts, everything." She gestured toward the notebook. "You could probably have me arrested." The word arrested hit me like a physical blow. The thought had crossed my mind during my darkest moments over the past few weeks, but hearing her say it out loud made me realize how far we had both traveled from the relationship we used to have. "Is that what you think I want?" I asked, sitting back down across from her. "To have my own daughter arrested?" "I don't know what you want anymore," she said, wiping her eyes again. "I don't even know who I am anymore. 3 months ago, I would never have imagined I could steal from anyone, especially you. And you've been sitting here for weeks, watching me, documenting what I was doing. We've both become people I don't recognize." The truth of her words settled over me. I had become someone who hid cameras and recorded serial numbers and watched my daughter's every move with suspicion. The mother I used to be would have confronted this head-on from the beginning, with love and directness. Instead, I had become secretive and calculating. "You're right," I admitted. "I should have talked to you the moment I suspected something. But Sophia, I was so hurt and confused. I kept hoping I was wrong." "But you weren't wrong." She looked down at her hands. "And now you have proof of exactly how wrong you weren't." I set the notebook on the coffee table between us. "This isn't evidence for a court case, Sophia. This is documentation of a problem we need to solve together. She looked up at me with surprise. What do you mean? I mean that whatever trouble this other person is in, whatever situation drove you to this, we're going to figure it out. But first, I need you to tell me everything. No more partial confessions or vague references to someone you can't name. Sophia's face went pale again. Mom, if I tell you everything, you're going to want to get involved. And this isn't something you can fix. Try me. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the notebook on the table. I could see her internal struggle, weighing secrets against trust, fear against hope. The person I've been helping, she said finally, is David. My heart sank. David was her ex-boyfriend from college, someone I had never particularly liked but had tolerated for Sophia's sake. They had broken up over a year ago, and I thought he was completely out of her life. David is back in your life? Not the way you think, she said quickly. We're not together. But Mom, he's in serious trouble, and some very dangerous people think he owes them money. A lot of money. The room seemed to grow colder. What kind of dangerous people? The kind who don't care that he doesn't actually have what they think he has. The kind who have made it clear that they'll hurt people he cares about if he doesn't pay them back. She looked directly at me. Including me. The words hung in the air between us like a toxic cloud. I felt my chest tighten as the full weight of what Sophia was telling me began to settle in. The cozy familiarity of my living room suddenly felt fragile, as if the walls themselves might not be enough to keep out whatever darkness had followed my daughter here. Sophia. I kept my voice steady, though my hands were trembling. Are you telling me that you've been stealing from me because David is being threatened by some kind of criminals? She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks again. He came to me about 2 months ago. He was desperate, Mom. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept in days. He said he'd gotten involved with some people who loan money, and there had been a misunderstanding about how much he owed and when it was due. I moved from my chair to sit beside her on the couch, close enough to see the exhaustion etched in the lines around her eyes. My daughter had been carrying this burden for months, and I had been so focused on my missing money that I hadn't noticed how much weight she'd lost, how often she looked over her shoulder when she visited, how she'd started parking on the street instead of in my driveway. What kind of misunderstanding? I asked, though I suspected I didn't want to know the answer. He borrowed money for his business, that app he was trying to develop. But the people he borrowed from weren't exactly a bank. She wiped her nose with the tissue I handed her. When the app failed and he couldn't make his payments, they said the interest was compounding daily. What started as $5,000 became $15,000, then $30,000. By the time he came to me, they were demanding $50,000. The amount made my stomach drop. Even if I emptied my entire savings account, I couldn't come close to that number. And the realization that my daughter had been trying to chip away at such an enormous debt with $20 bills from my purse seemed almost heartbreakingly naive. Sophia, in 2 months, how much have you actually been able to give him? She looked ashamed. Maybe $800 total. I know it's not much, but he said every little bit helped buy him more time. He said as long as he could show them he was making an effort, they would be patient. I closed my eyes and rubbed my temples, trying to process the magnitude of the situation. And you believed that these dangerous people would be satisfied with $20 at a time? I didn't know what else to do. The words came out as almost a wail. He said they knew where I worked, where I lived. He said they had mentioned you by name, Mom. They knew your address, knew that I came here for Sunday dinners. David said if I could just help him show good faith, he could figure out a real solution. The temperature in the room seemed to drop another 10 degrees. The idea that strangers had been discussing me, learning my routines, knowing about our family traditions, made me feel violated in a way that went far beyond the missing money from my purse. Have you seen these people? Has anyone approached you directly? No, but David showed me photos they sent him. Sophia's voice was barely above a whisper. Pictures of me leaving my apartment, pictures of your house, pictures of me walking into your front door. I stood up abruptly, moving to the window that faced my front yard. The street looked exactly as it always did in the late afternoon, with Mrs. Peterson walking her small dog and the mailman making his rounds. But now, every parked car seemed suspicious. Every person I didn't immediately recognize felt like a potential threat. How long has David known that his plan isn't working? I asked, still looking out the window. Because surely even he can do the math. $800 doesn't make a meaningful dent in $50,000. I think he's getting desperate. He's been calling me more often, asking if there are other ways I can get money. He suggested I could ask you for a loan, or maybe take out a credit card, or... She trailed off. I turned back to face her. Or what? He mentioned that you probably have jewelry or electronics, things that might be worth more than the cash in your purse. Sophia's face was red with shame. I told him absolutely not. I said I would never steal anything like that from you. A cold realization washed over me. But he kept pushing. He's getting scared, Mom. And when David gets scared, he doesn't think clearly. He's been talking about maybe leaving town, just disappearing. But he's convinced that if he runs, these people will come after me instead. I sat back down next to my daughter, taking her hands in mine. They were ice cold and shaking slightly. Sophia, I need you to listen to me very carefully. You are not responsible for David's debts. You are not responsible for his poor decisions. And you are certainly not responsible for protecting him from the consequences of his own actions. But Mom, if something happens to him because I couldn't help enough, then that will be tragic, but it will not be your fault. I squeezed her hands. What will be our fault is if we let this continue and put our entire family in danger because we're trying to solve a problem that can't be solved this way. She looked up at me with the same expression she'd had as a little girl when she'd broken something valuable and was hoping against hope that I could somehow fix it. So what do we do? Before I could answer, my phone rang from the kitchen counter. The sound unnaturally loud in the tense quiet of the room. We both froze, looking toward the sound as if it might be bringing news we weren't ready to hear. I should get that, I said, but neither of us moved. The phone rang again, and I could see David's name displayed on the screen from where we sat. The phone rang a third time, David's name pulsing on the screen like an accusation. Sophia started to get up, but I placed a gentle hand on her arm. Let me, I said, walking to the kitchen counter. I picked up the phone and answered, putting it on speaker so Sophia could hear. Hello, David? Mrs. Chen, thank God you answered. Is Sophia there? I've been trying to reach her, but her phone keeps going to voicemail. I looked at my daughter, who had wrapped her arms around herself and was shaking her head frantically. She's here, David, but she's pretty upset right now. Upset? Why is she upset? His voice had that edge to it that I'd learned to recognize over the years, the tone that meant he was about to make everything someone else's problem. Did she tell you what's going on? She told me about your gambling debts, yes. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When David spoke again, his voice was quieter, but somehow more intense. Then you understand how serious this situation is. Mrs. Chen, I know what Sophia's been doing, taking money from your purse, and I know how that must look. But you have to understand, we're running out of time here. Sophia had gotten up and moved closer to the phone, tears streaming down her face. I could see her struggling with whether to speak or stay silent. David, I said carefully, what exactly are you asking of us? I need more. The $800 Sophia's managed to get, it's not enough. These people, they're not patient and they're not reasonable. I need at least $5,000 by Friday, or... He didn't finish the sentence. Or what? I pressed. Or they're going to start looking at other ways to collect. And that might include going after people close to me? Sophia made a small sound of distress, and I felt my protective instincts flare. David, are you threatening my daughter? No, God, no, Mrs. Chen. I would never threaten Sophia. I'm trying to protect her. But these people, they don't care about what I would or wouldn't do. They care about getting their money. I looked at Sophia, who was now sitting at my kitchen table with her head in her hands. And you think the solution is for us to somehow come up with $5,000? I know it's a lot to ask. But Mrs. Chen, you own your house, you have savings, you have things of value. Surely there's some way you could help us out of this situation. I swear to you, I will pay back every penny. The audacity of it took my breath away. David, you're asking me to bail you out of a $50,000 gambling debt with my retirement savings. It's not the full $50,000. If I can get $5,000 to them by Friday, they'll give me more time to work out a payment plan for the rest. Sophia looked up at me with desperate eyes, and I could see she was torn between hope that maybe there was a solution and shame at what was being asked of me. And what happens when they want the next payment? I asked. Do we raid my retirement account again? Do we take out a second mortgage on my house? It won't come to that. I'll figure something out, I promise. Maybe I can get a second job, or sell my car, or... David, I interrupted him, my voice firm. You've had months to figure something out. Instead, you've been having my daughter steal from me. What makes you think you'll suddenly develop a plan now? Sophia flinched at my words, and I immediately felt bad for being so blunt in front of her. Because now I'll have breathing room, David said, his voice taking on that desperate edge again. Look, I know I've made mistakes. I know I've handled this all wrong. But Mrs. Chen, I'm begging you, help us this one time, and I swear it will never happen again. I looked at my daughter, who was watching me with a mixture of hope and terror. In that moment, I could see exactly how this had all started, how David's desperation had slowly pulled her in, how her love for him had made her willing to compromise her own values. David, I said slowly, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I am not going to give you $5,000. Sophia's face crumpled, and I heard David's sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. But Mrs. Chen, I'm not finished, I continued. I'm not going to give you the money because giving you the money won't solve this problem. It will just make you think that gambling away $50,000 has no real consequences. There are consequences, David said, his voice rising. These people are going to... Then maybe it's time you dealt with those consequences instead of asking my daughter to steal from her own mother to protect you from them. The silence on the other end of the line stretched on for so long that I wondered if he'd hung up. Finally, I heard him say, very quietly, So that's it? You're just going to let them hurt me? Before I could respond, I heard a car door slam outside, followed by footsteps on my front walkway. The sound of those footsteps made my heart race. Through the phone, I could hear David's sharp intake of breath, and beside me on the couch, Sophia's entire body went rigid. Someone's here, I whispered, though I wasn't sure why I was whispering. My mind immediately jumped to the worst possible scenario. Were these the people David owed money to? Had they somehow tracked him to my house? Sophia grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my skin. Mom, what if it's them? David's voice crackled through the phone, panic evident. Mrs. Chen, don't answer the door. Just stay quiet until they leave. But even as fear coursed through me, a part of my mind was analyzing the situation. The footsteps hadn't been hurried or aggressive. They'd sounded normal, measured, and whoever it was had parked in my driveway, not lurked around the corner. People with violent intentions didn't usually announce their arrival so clearly. The doorbell rang, and I found myself thinking about how this moment perfectly illustrated the chaos that David's gambling had brought into our lives. Here I was, a 62-year-old woman who had lived in this neighborhood for 15 years, afraid to answer my own door because of debts I'd never incurred and threats I'd never invited. I'm going to see who it is, I said, standing up from the couch. Mom, no. Sophia's voice was barely above a whisper. Mrs. Chen, please, David's voice urged from the phone. Just wait it out. But I was tired of being afraid. Tired of living my life around David's poor choices. I walked to the front window and carefully peered through the blinds. Standing on my front porch was my neighbor Jenny, holding what looked like a casserole dish. The relief that washed over me was so intense, I actually laughed out loud. Jenny was 73 years old, maybe 5 feet tall, and had been bringing me food ever since her husband passed away 2 years ago. She was probably the least threatening person in the entire world. It's just Jenny from next door, I called back to Sophia, who was still clutching the phone with David on the line. I opened the door, and Jenny's face lit up with her usual warm smile. Hello, dear. I made too much tuna casserole again, and I thought you might like some. That's so thoughtful of you, Jenny. Thank you. I took the dish from her hands, marveling at how normal this interaction felt compared to the chaos of the past few minutes. Is everything all right? Jenny asked, studying my face with the keen perception that comes with age. You look a bit flustered. Oh, just dealing with some family matters, I said, which was certainly true enough. Jenny nodded knowingly. Well, you know where to find me if you need anything. That casserole should heat up nicely in the oven at 350 degrees. After she left, I returned to the living room where Sophia was still holding the phone, though she looked considerably more relaxed. False alarm, I announced, setting the casserole dish on the coffee table. David's voice came through the speaker, sounding slightly embarrassed. I'm sorry we all panicked like that. Don't apologize for that, I said, sitting back down next to Sophia. Apologize for creating a situation where we have reason to panic in the first place. The brief interruption had given me time to think, and I found my resolve strengthening. Seeing Sophia's terrified reaction to someone simply arriving at my door had crystallized something for me. This wasn't just about money, or gambling, or even theft. This was about the kind of life my daughter was being forced to live. David, I want you to think about what just happened, I said into the phone. My daughter was sitting in her childhood home, afraid to answer the door because of your debts. Do you understand how wrong that is? There was silence on the other end of the line. This isn't the life I want for Sophia, I continued. And if you truly love her, it shouldn't be the life you want for her either. Of course I don't want this, David said, his voice thick with emotion. But what choice do I have? The debt exists whether I want it to or not. You have the choice of how you deal with it, I replied. And so far, you've chosen to deal with it by involving my daughter in theft and putting her in potential danger. That stops now. Sophia was looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. There was gratitude there, but also something that looked like fear. "Mom," she said quietly, "if you don't help us, I don't know what David is going to do." The way she said it sent a chill down my spine. There was something in her tone, an implication that made me wonder what other pressures she'd been under. What other conversations had happened that I didn't know about. "Sophia," I said carefully, "what do you mean by that?" She looked down at her hands, twisting her wedding ring around her finger. "He's been talking about taking out loans from other people, dangerous people. He says if we can't come up with the money soon, he might not have a choice." My blood ran cold. "What kind of people, Sophia?" "I don't know exactly," she whispered. "But the way he talks about them. Mom, I'm scared, not just for him, but for me too. He keeps saying we're in this together, that marriage means we share everything, including debts." David's voice cut through the speaker, sharp and defensive. "Sophia, you don't need to make it sound so dramatic." "Dramatic?" I couldn't keep the anger out of my voice. "My daughter is sitting here afraid for her safety, and you think she's being dramatic?" "Those people aren't going to hurt Sophia," David said, but there was something hollow in his tone that suggested even he wasn't entirely convinced. "How can you possibly guarantee that?" I stood up, pacing to the window and back. "David, listen to yourself. You're talking about borrowing money from loan sharks while my daughter sits here terrified every time someone knocks on the door." Sophia pulled her knees up to her chest, making herself small in the corner of the couch. "Mom, I haven't been sleeping. Every car that drives by our house at night, every phone call, every unexpected knock, I jump. This isn't living." The pain in her voice was almost unbearable. This vibrant, confident woman I'd raised had been reduced to a frightened shadow of herself. "David," I said, my voice deadly calm, "I want you to explain to me exactly how much money we're talking about. And I want the truth this time. No minimizing, no sugarcoating." There was a long pause. I could hear him breathing heavily through the phone. $47,000, he finally said, plus interest that keeps growing every month. Sophia's head shot up. $47,000? David, you told me it was 30. It was 30 when I first told you, he said quickly. But with the interest and the penalties for missed payments? When was that? Sophia demanded. When did you first tell me it was 30,000? Another pause. 3 months ago. 3 months? Sophia was on her feet now, pacing like I had been. You've known about this for 3 months and you're just telling me the real amount now? I didn't want you to worry more than you already were. So instead, you let me steal from my mother thinking it would actually make a difference? Her voice cracked. Do you have any idea how much I've hated myself? How sick I've felt every time I took money from her purse? I sat back down, pulling Sophia gently back to the couch beside me. How much have you taken total? She buried her face in her hands. Maybe $800 over the past 2 months. I kept telling myself it was helping, that it was making a real difference. But $800 against $47,000. She laughed bitterly. It's nothing. It's less than nothing. It's not nothing to me, I said softly. Not because of the money, but because of what it's done to you. What it's done to us. David's voice came through the phone, smaller now. I never wanted any of this to happen. But it did happen, I said. And now we need to figure out what we're going to do about it. Sophia looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. Mom, I can't ask you to help with that much money. I won't. You're not asking, I said, but I need to know everything before I can decide anything. David, who exactly are these dangerous people you're thinking of borrowing from? The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. David? Sophia prompted. There's this guy Marcus, he said finally. He works with some of the other guys who gamble. He's offered to front me the money to pay off the casino debt. At what interest rate? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer would be horrifying. 20% per month. Sophia gasped. David, that's insane. That's not a loan. That's a death sentence. It would buy us time, he said weakly. Time for what? I demanded. To dig yourself into an even deeper hole? David, at 20% monthly interest, you'd owe nearly $60,000 after just 1 month. Where exactly do you think that money is going to come from? I don't know, he said, and for the first time since this conversation started, he sounded completely broken. I honestly don't know. I just keep thinking that if I can just get through this immediate crisis, maybe I can figure something out. That's magical thinking, I said. And it's the same kind of thinking that got you into this mess in the first place. Sophia was staring at the phone with a look of dawning horror. David, when is Marcus expecting an answer? The pause before he responded told me everything I needed to know. Tomorrow night. The silence that followed was deafening. I felt my chest tighten as the full weight of what David had just revealed settled over us. Tomorrow night. Not next week, not next month. Tomorrow. I watched Sophia's face drain of color as she stared at the phone. Her hands were shaking again, and I could see her mind racing, probably calculating how much more money she could possibly steal from me in the next 24 hours. The thought made my stomach turn. David, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. You need to understand something. If you take money from this Marcus person, you're not solving your problem. You're trading one dangerous situation for something infinitely worse. But the casino people are a business, I interrupted. They want their money back, yes, but they also want to stay in business. These loan sharks you're talking about, they're not running a legitimate operation. When you can't pay them back, and David, you won't be able to pay them back, what do you think happens then? Through the phone, I could hear him breathing heavily. I can't just do nothing. Nobody's asking you to do nothing, I said. But we need to think this through logically, not emotionally. I stood up and began pacing again, my mind spinning through possibilities. $47,000. It might as well have been $47 million. My savings account had maybe $12,000 in it. My retirement fund was more substantial, but touching it would mean penalties and taxes that would eat up a significant portion. Sophia was watching me pace, and I could see the guilt eating away at her. Mom, please don't even think about using your retirement money. I can't let you do that. It's not your decision to make, I said, more sharply than I intended. Then, softening my tone. But you're right. Draining my retirement isn't a realistic solution either. So what are we supposed to do? David's voice was getting higher, more desperate. Just let them come after me? I've heard stories about what these people do to send a message. What people? I asked. The casino or these loan sharks you're considering? Both, he said quietly. I stopped pacing and looked at Sophia. She was hugging herself, rocking slightly back and forth on the couch. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about my family's safety, their futures, their ability to sleep at night without fear. David, I need you to be completely honest with me about something, I said. Have you received any specific threats? Has anyone actually threatened physical harm? The pause was shorter this time. Not exactly threats. But I've been getting calls every day. They're not saying they're going to hurt me, but they're making it clear that their patience is running out. What exactly are they saying? Things like, "We know where you work, and we know where you live." Yesterday, one of them mentioned that they knew I had family. That's when I really started to panic. Sophia's face went white. They mentioned us? Not by name, David said quickly. But they said they knew I wasn't alone? That family has a way of motivating people to find solutions. I felt a chill run down my spine. These weren't idle words. These were calculated pressure tactics designed to push David toward desperation. And they were working. "Listen to me very carefully," I said. "You are not taking money from Marcus. Under no circumstances are you getting involved with loan sharks. Do you understand me?" "Then what?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But we're going to figure something out. We're going to figure it out together." Sophia looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "Mom, how? How are we possibly going to come up with that much money?" I sat back down beside her, taking her hand in mine. It was cold and clammy. "I don't know that either, but I know that making this problem bigger isn't the answer. David," I continued, addressing the phone, "I need you to call these casino people first thing tomorrow morning. And tell them what? That you're working on getting them their money, but you need more time. Ask them for 2 weeks. They're not going to agree to that. They might if you can give them something, a partial payment maybe. Proof that you're serious about paying them back." I was thinking out loud now, my mind racing through possibilities. How much could you scrape together right now if you liquidated everything, sold everything you own, emptied every account? "Maybe $5,000, David said. "6 if I sell my car, but then I can't get to work." "Keep the car for now, but $5,000 or $6,000 shows good faith. It's not nothing." Sophia squeezed my hand. "Mom, what are you thinking?" I wasn't entirely sure yet, but the beginnings of a plan were forming. "I'm thinking we need to buy time. Real time, not the fake time that comes from borrowing money from criminals." "And then what?" David asked. "Then we figure out a real solution. Maybe you file for bankruptcy. Maybe we set up a payment plan with the casino that you can actually afford. Maybe I help with some of the money, but not all of it, and not in a way that destroys my financial security." I could hear the hope creeping into David's voice. "You think the casino would agree to a payment plan?" "I think they'd rather get their money back over time than not get it back at all. And I think they definitely prefer that to you disappearing or ending up unable to pay because you're dealing with loan sharks." Sophia was nodding slowly. "It's worth trying, at least." "But David," I said, my voice firm again, "this only works if you completely stop gambling. Not just casino gambling. Sports betting, poker games, lottery tickets, everything. If we're going to help you out of this hole, you cannot dig it any deeper." The silence on the other end of the phone stretched longer than I was comfortable with. "David?" "I'm here," he said finally. I know you're right. I know I need to stop." "But what if I can't? What if I try to stop, and I can't do it?" It was the first time he'd admitted that this might be bigger than just bad decisions and bad luck. The first time he'd acknowledged that he might be dealing with something he couldn't control on his own. "Then we'll figure that out too," I said. "But we can't solve everything at once. Right now, we need to focus on keeping you safe and buying us time to come up with a real plan." Sophia looked at me with something that might have been admiration. "Mom, do you really think this could work?" Honestly, I had no idea. $47,000 was still $47,000, and that number wasn't going to change just because we had a plan. But David taking money from loan sharks would only make everything worse, and doing nothing wasn't an option either. I think it's our best shot, I said. But David, you need to promise me something. You cannot, under any circumstances, meet with this Marcus person tomorrow night. But what if the casino won't give me more time? What if they... Then we'll deal with that when it happens. But taking money from loan sharks isn't dealing with the problem. It's just trading a problem you might be able to solve for one you definitely can't. I could hear him breathing heavily through the phone. Okay, I won't meet with Marcus. But Mom, what if this doesn't work? What if we can't come up with enough money and the casino won't accept a payment plan? It was a fair question, and one I didn't have a good answer for. But as I looked at Sophia, still holding my hand, still carrying the guilt of stealing money that wouldn't even make a dent in this problem, I knew we had to try. Then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, I said. But David, you need to understand something. This family doesn't abandon each other. We don't let each other face things alone. But we also don't enable each other's destructive behavior. What does that mean exactly? I took a deep breath, knowing that what I was about to say would determine the direction of all our lives for the foreseeable future. It means that if we do this, if we help you, there are going to be conditions. Non-negotiable conditions. And if you can't agree to them and stick to them, then you're going to have to find another way out of this mess. The silence on the other end of the phone stretched so long, I thought David might have hung up. When he finally spoke, his voice was smaller than I'd heard it since he was a child. What kind of conditions? I looked at Sophia, who was watching me with wide eyes. This conversation was as much for her as it was for David. Both of my children needed to understand that love didn't mean enabling destructive behavior. First, you move back home. Immediately. Tonight, if possible. Mom, I'm 26 years old. I can't just... You can't afford your apartment, David. You haven't been able to for months, which is probably part of how you got into this mess. Moving home isn't a punishment. It's a practical solution that eliminates one of your major expenses. I heard him take a shaky breath. Okay, what else? You turn over your bank accounts, credit cards, everything. Complete financial transparency. No access to money without discussion. That's pretty extreme, Mom. Sophia squeezed my hand, and I squeezed back. David, you just told me you owe $47,000 to a casino and were planning to borrow money from loan sharks. Extreme got left behind about 6 months ago. The truth of that statement seemed to hit him, because I could hear him crying softly on the other end of the line. Third condition, I continued, trying to keep my voice steady. You get help. Real help. Not just promising you'll stop, but actual professional help for gambling addiction. I don't even know how to find that kind of help. That's not your job right now. Your job is to agree to get it. Sophia released my hand and got up, walking over to the window. Her shoulders were tense, and I could see her reflection in the glass, her face troubled. And fourth, I said, you find a job. Any job. I don't care if you're flipping burgers or cleaning offices. You work, you contribute what you can to fixing this mess, and you start rebuilding some sense of responsibility. David was quiet for a long time. What if I mess up? What if I agree to all this and then I can't follow through? It was an honest question, and it deserved an honest answer. Then you'll face the consequences of your choices without dragging the rest of us down with you. The harshness of my own words surprised me, but I didn't take them back. They needed to be said. I love you, David, more than you probably understand right now. But I won't watch you destroy yourself. And I won't let you destroy this family in the process. If you want our help, you accept our terms. All of them. No negotiation, no exceptions. Sophia turned back from the window. Mom, can I talk to him? I handed her the phone, curious to see what my daughter would say to her brother. David, it's me. Her voice was softer than mine had been, but there was steel underneath it. I need you to know something. I've been stealing money from Mom's purse. I heard David's sharp intake of breath through the phone. Not much, Sophia continued. A 20 here, a 40 there. I told myself it was for gas money or coffee, but really it was just because I wanted things and I didn't want to ask for them. She was looking directly at me as she spoke, tears running down her face. I found out about your debt because I got caught stealing, David. Do you understand what I'm saying? Your little sister is stealing money because somewhere in my head, I learned that taking what I want is easier than dealing with reality. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. I'd been so focused on David's problems that I hadn't even considered how his behavior might be affecting Sophia. I'm not blaming you, she continued. But I need you to understand that your choices don't just affect you. They affect all of us. And if you don't get help, if you don't change, I'm scared of what I might become. She handed the phone back to me, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. David? I said. Are you still there? I'm here. His voice was thick with emotion. I had no idea. Sophia, I'm so sorry. Don't apologize to me, Sophia called out, loud enough for him to hear. Fix it. Just fix it. I took the phone back. So what's it going to be, David? Do you accept our conditions, or do you try to handle this on your own? The pause that followed felt like it lasted forever. When David finally answered, there was something different in his voice. Something that sounded almost like resolve. I accept your conditions. All of them. When do you want me to come home? Relief flooded through me, but it was tempered by the knowledge that accepting help and actually following through were two very different things. Tonight, I said. Pack whatever you need and come tonight. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow. Mom? There's something else I need to tell you before I come home. Something about the casino debt that I haven't mentioned yet. My blood ran cold. What is it, David? The $47,000? That's not the total amount I owe. That's just what I owe to the casino. There are other debts too, and if we're going to do this, if we're really going to try to fix everything, you need to know exactly how bad it is. I felt my legs give out, and I sank back into my kitchen chair. Sophia immediately moved closer, placing her hand on my shoulder. How much more, David? My voice came out as barely a whisper. Mom, please don't hang up. Let me explain everything, and then you can decide if you still want to help me. I looked at Sophia, who nodded encouragingly. Go ahead, tell me. The casino debt is $47,000, but I also have credit cards that I maxed out trying to win the money back. Those are at about $32,000 total. And I borrowed money from my 401k that I'm supposed to pay back, which is another $15,000. I did the math in my head, my hands shaking. David, that's almost $94,000. $94,237, he said quietly. I know the exact amount because I've been staring at it every night for months. Sophia squeezed my shoulder harder. I could see the shock on her face, but also something else. Determination. There's one more thing, David continued. Some of those credit cards, I'm 3 months behind on payments. My credit is completely destroyed. and I got a letter last week saying one of the companies is considering legal action. I put my head in my hands. The $20 bills Sophia had been taking from my purse suddenly seemed so insignificant in comparison, yet I understood now why she had been so affected. We were a family that had somehow lost our way when it came to honesty about money. "Mom?" David's voice was small. "Are you still there?" "I'm here." I lifted my head and looked at Sophia. "We're both here. I understand if this changes everything. I understand if $94,000 is just too much. I understand if you tell me I'm on my own." I thought about the retirement savings I'd carefully built up over the years. I thought about the house that was finally paid off. I thought about the security I'd worked so hard to create. And then I looked at my daughter, who had been stealing small amounts because she'd learned that hiding financial problems was normal in our family. "David, I need you to listen to me very carefully," I said. "I cannot give you $94,000. I don't have that kind of money, and even if I did, it wouldn't help you in the long run." I heard him take a shaky breath. "But here's what I can do. I can help you create a plan to deal with this systematically. I can help you negotiate with creditors. I can provide you with a safe place to live while you work your way out of this. And I can make sure you get the professional help you need so this never happens again." Sophia was nodding vigorously, tears in her eyes. "The conditions I mentioned earlier still stand," I continued, "but now there are more. You'll need to meet with a financial counselor. You'll need to get a second job if necessary. Every penny of extra money goes toward these debts, not toward gambling. And David, if I find out you've placed even one bet, if you've bought even one lottery ticket, the help stops immediately." "I understand," he said. "Mom, I swear to you, I understand." "And there's one more condition," I said, looking at Sophia. "You're going to help your sister understand that what she's been doing is part of this same problem. We're all going to be honest with each other from now on, about money, about problems, about everything." "What do you mean about Sophia?" Sophia took the phone from me. "I mean that while you were hiding a $94,000 gambling problem, I was stealing 20s from Mom's purse. I mean that we're both going to figure out why we thought lying was easier than telling the truth." When she handed the phone back to me, I could hear David crying. "I never wanted this to affect anyone else," he said. "I thought I could handle it on my own." "But it did affect us," I said. "It affected all of us, even when we didn't know what was happening." "That's what families do, David. We affect each other, which means we can also heal each other." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where David and Sophia had learned to ride bikes, where we'd had garage sales and block parties, where we'd built a life together. "So, what do you say, son? Are you ready to come home and do the hard work?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "I'll be there in 2 hours." After I hung up, Sophia and I sat in silence for a few minutes. "Mom," she finally said, "I'm scared about the money. $94,000 is so much." "It is a lot," I agreed. "But you know what scares me more? The idea that we could have kept living with all these secrets. The idea that you might have kept taking money, and David might have kept gambling, and I might have kept pretending everything was fine." She nodded slowly. "So what happens now?" "Now we figure it out together. All of us. No more secrets, no more quick fixes, no more pretending problems will solve themselves." I reached over and took her hand. "And Sophia? Tomorrow, you and I are going to talk about why you felt like you needed to take money instead of asking for it. Really talk about it." "I'd like that," she said. "I've been feeling terrible about it for weeks." As we waited for David to arrive, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not optimism exactly, but something close to it. Hope, maybe. The hope that comes from finally knowing the truth, even when the truth is overwhelming. The road ahead was going to be difficult. $94,000 wasn't going to disappear overnight. But for the first time in a long time, we were going to face it together, honestly. And sometimes, that's the only place healing can begin.